During dinner, I was playing a game on my wife's phone when a message came in from her boss. "We're still on for that weekend in Paris, right?" I read it aloud, and she froze mid-sip. "It's not what you think," she mumbled. I smiled, grabbed my coat, and said, "Good, because I think you're fired from this marriage." Her mom gasped. It was a Thursday evening in early March, one of those days where the sky never really brightens. Just clouds all day, the kind that hang low and heavy, like they're waiting to drop something worse than rain. I'd gotten home from work later than usual. Furnace repairs all day in a retirement home out in Ankeny. Clients were sweet, but the day had dragged. I was tired, dusty, craving a cold beer and a warm dinner. We had dinner plans at Bonnie's, Talia's mother. She invited us over for one of her proper sit-down dinners, which meant awkward small talk, 2 kinds of starch, and no phones at the table. It always felt like a performance, like we were actors in a polite little play no one wanted to watch, but we did it every few weeks out of obligation. Talia was in the kitchen putting on lipstick when I came in, already dressed in that blue blouse she wore when she wanted to feel sharp. I gave her a peck on the cheek. She smelled like oranges and vanilla. "You ready?" I asked, pulling on a jacket. She nodded, glancing at her phone before slipping it into her purse. That glance meant something then, though I didn't know it yet. We got to Bonnie's around 6. Roast chicken, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes with too much butter, her usual lineup. She even had one of those cheap red wines that Talia liked, poured generously into the crystal glasses she kept locked up except for these occasions. The conversation was mostly Bonnie rehashing her neighbor's landscaping drama and some story about her new book club member, a widow who'd once danced with Elvis. Maybe. I half listened, nodding in the right places, eating quietly. Talia was scrolling through her phone under the table like a teenager, trying to hide it behind her napkin. I tapped her knee gently. "Battery's dead," I whispered. "Can I check the score?" She passed me the phone without looking. It was unlocked. I don't even remember if I said thank you. I went to open the browser, but before I could, a message slid in across the top of the screen. "We're still on for that weekend in Paris, right?" Face blowing a kiss. Matthew, it was one of those moments where time doesn't stop. Exactly. It just gets really, really slow. I stared at the message for maybe 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, I felt the air change. Felt my stomach tighten. Felt something crack. I didn't mean to read it aloud. It just came out, in the same flat tone I used to read off part numbers at work. "We're still on for that weekend in Paris, right?" Talia froze mid-sip. Her glass paused halfway between the table and her mouth. A thin ripple traveled through the wine like it felt the tension too. Then she blinked, just once, and said quietly, "It's not what you think." Bonnie turned, squinting, a puzzled look on her face. "What does that mean?" she asked. "What weekend in Paris?" I stood up. I didn't scream, didn't curse, didn't throw the phone or the wine glass or the damn chicken platter. I just stood up, pulled on my coat, and said, with the kind of calm that comes from something inside you turning completely numb, "Good, because I think you're fired from this marriage." Bonnie gasped. Talia opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me like the end of a sentence. I didn't even take my truck. I walked the 8 blocks to the Casey's by the highway and called my brother. Alden didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'll be there in 10. When he picked me up, I still hadn't said what happened. He drove, kept the radio low. I stared out the window and tried not to think about Paris. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the planning. The time it took to arrange a weekend getaway to another continent. That wasn't a drunken mistake. That was deliberate. That was another life being lived behind the curtain of ours. That night, I crashed on Alden's couch. His youngest, a 3-year-old named Tessa, woke up twice crying. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. "Talia, 6:13 a.m. please come home." "Talia, 6:46 a.m. I swear it's not what you think." "Talia, 7:08 a.m. please just talk to me." "Talia, 8:01 a.m. I didn't mean for it to happen." Didn't mean what to happen? I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without shattering something. I didn't go to work. I drove around instead. Stopped at Gray's Lake, sat on a bench, watched a kid skip stones while his dad pretended to care. I felt hollow. Not angry, just unmoored. By noon, I ended up at my buddy Reese's garage. He runs a repair shop out in West Des Moines, and he's the kind of guy who always has a beer in the fridge and knows when not to talk. When I finally told him what happened, he just let out a low whistle and said, "Man, that's rough." That was it. That was all I needed. Over the next few days, I started piecing things together. Looking back, every time she came home from a conference with some fancy new piece of jewelry or a designer bag, I believed her. Every late night with client calls, I didn't question. I thought we had something built on trust. We'd met at a party in Cedar Rapids 14 years ago. She was standing by the chips, mocking the DJ's playlist under her breath. I laughed, we started talking, and that was it. She was clever, gorgeous, always 5 steps ahead of everyone in the room. I loved her completely, built my life around her. Now, It felt like none of it had ever been real. I finally went back to the house when I knew she'd be out. I needed clothes, my tools, a few photos. When she came in unexpectedly and saw me folding a shirt, she stopped in the doorway like she'd been hit. "Colin, don't," I said, not looking up. She stepped in quietly. The air between us was full of things neither of us knew how to say. "It started last summer," she said finally. Her voice was shaking, but low, controlled. "It was one trip, one night. I told him it was a mistake. But then we kept talking. I stayed silent. Let her speak. I was lonely," she added after a while. "You were always working, always tired. I didn't plan it, I swear to God. He made me feel seen. I looked up then, and I said the only thing that mattered. I saw you every damn day." She didn't cry. Not then. She just sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. For once, she had no defense. That night, I sat in the truck for 2 hours. I didn't go back to Alden's. Didn't go anywhere. Just sat. Thought. Let it sink in. A few days later, Bonnie came by. She looked older than she had at dinner. Tired. "I'm not here to defend her," she said, handing me a manila envelope. "But I thought you deserved to see it." Inside were emails, flight confirmations, hotel reservations, screenshots. One stood out. A booking for a suite in Paris under Mr. and Mrs. Boyd. Not just a weekend trip. A fantasy life. "She told me she was thinking about leaving you," Bonnie said quietly. I told her to wait. To think it through. I had no idea it was this serious. I nodded. She left the casserole. I never touched it. Later that night, I called the number on the confirmation email. "Matthew Boyd," the voice said on the other end. "This is Colin," I said. "Talia's husband." There was a pause. Then, "I figured I'd be hearing from you. You love her." "No," he said. "She wanted something different." "So did I? We didn't talk about you much." That sentence hit like a hammer. Like I was a footnote in someone else's story. "She's not going to Paris," I said. "She's staying here to figure out how to pack." Then I hung up. That was when I knew it was over. Not just emotionally, but practically. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Talia didn't fight the papers. She cried. She promised therapy. She offered to quit her job. Said she'd burn it all down to start fresh. But something in me had shifted. Not just broken, shifted. Moved so far from where it had been. There was no going back. "I don't care where you work," I said. "I care who you are." And she didn't have an answer. I moved into a furnished rental on the east side of town. Small place. Single bedroom, linoleum kitchen floor, a water heater that moaned like a ghost when it kicked on. But it was quiet. Neutral. No memories attached. That was the important thing. Every inch of the house Talia and I shared was covered in ghosts. Hers, mine, ours. I didn't take much with me when I left. A few boxes of clothes, my toolbox, my dad's old recliner, and the framed photo of us from our anniversary trip to Colorado. I kept it, not because I missed her, but because I needed to remember that version of myself. The man who loved without conditions, who trusted so completely. I didn't want to lose him completely, even if he'd been naive. I told Alden the divorce was official. He nodded, handed me a beer, didn't say much. That's what I appreciated most about him. No advice, just presence. Work became a kind of refuge. The days felt long but simple. Ducts to clean, thermostats to fix, boilers to inspect. No one asked me how I was doing. No one pried. I could exist in routine, in sweat and noise and tools. I started saying yes to every overtime shift offered. Not for the money, really. I just didn't want to be alone with my own thoughts. Nights were the hardest. Especially weekends. There's something about silence on a Friday night that hits differently when you used to share that silence with someone. You start noticing every sound your old house didn't have. The fridge's buzz, the clicking baseboard heater, the way your own breathing echoes. I'd sit in the recliner with the lights off and a six-pack beside me, flipping through channels I didn't care about. Sometimes, I'd stare at the phone, thumb hovering over her name in my contacts. Not to call her, just to see it. Proof she still existed. Once I did call. 2 weeks after the papers were filed. I didn't plan to. My hand just moved before my brain stopped it. She answered on the second ring. Quietly. "Colin." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just listened. To her breathing. To mine. "You okay?" she asked, voice tight. I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. One afternoon, I came home from work and found a box by my door. No note. Just a box. Inside were things that belonged to me, but had no real value. My old coffee mug from college, a t-shirt she used to sleep in, a book I never finished. She must have found them while cleaning out the house. At the bottom of the box was something wrapped in tissue, a small wooden keychain I made for her when we first moved in together. It had our initials carved into it, and the words, "Come home." That was the part that nearly broke me. Not because she returned it, but because she'd kept it this long. Through moves, job changes, years of being together. And still, it meant nothing in the end. I put it in a drawer and haven't touched it since. Reese invited me to a poker night not long after. Said it was low-key, just the guys, no pressure. I went. Tried to laugh. Tried to care. But sitting around a table with married men talking about kids' soccer schedules made me feel like a shadow, like I didn't belong anymore. I excused myself early, said I had an early call. No one pressed me. On the drive home, I took the long way through downtown, passing the old jazz bar where Talia and I had our third date. She had worn this green dress I still remember too well. She said the singer that night sounded like velvet. We stayed until they closed, slow dancing under string lights while the staff stacked chairs. I parked across from it for a while, engine idling. There was a couple out front, younger, laughing as they waited for their Uber. I watched them and wondered if they'd make it. If they'd learn to love each other with eyes wide open, or if they'd do what we did, love blindly, and then break when the truth came into focus. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. I'd moved past the rage, past the disbelief. What I felt now was something slower, quieter. Grief, maybe. Grief for the life we built and lost, for the years I'd never get back, for the version of her that I once believed would never hurt me. Bonnie called a few times in the following weeks. Always polite, always awkward. She said she still considered me family. I appreciated the thought, but every conversation felt like holding a lit match. Brief, hot, risky. Eventually, we stopped talking. One day, I saw Talia at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, reaching for a head of romaine. I saw her before she saw me, and my first instinct was to turn around and walk out. But I didn't. I stood there, watched her for a second. She looked thinner, paler, hair tied back in a lazy bun like she hadn't slept much. Then she saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. Just a long stare across the bananas and apples. Her mouth twitched, like she might say something. But she didn't. She gave a slight nod, almost imperceptible, and went back to bagging lettuce. I walked past her like a stranger. And that's exactly what we were now. I didn't go back to that store again. Kinsey, Alden's wife, asked me one evening if I'd ever consider dating again. Eventually, I said, maybe. I didn't mean it. At least, not then. I wasn't ready to let anyone that close. Not after what happened. There's a kind of scar that doesn't show up on skin but settles deep in your instincts. You learn to question the warmth in someone's smile. You wonder what text is popping up when their phone lights up at dinner. You don't become bitter. You just become cautious, wary of illusions. That said, life has a way of throwing you little surprises. A month ago, I was at the farmer's market downtown. First time I'd been in years. I went on a whim. Didn't expect anything. Just wanted to get out, maybe buy some jam or something. I ended up buying honey from a stand run by a woman named Mara. She asked if I liked wildflower or clover. I said I didn't know the difference. She laughed. One of those warm, unfiltered laughs that catches you off guard. We talked for a bit. She was in her late 30s, divorced too. Said she started keeping bees after her ex moved out and took the dog. Said the bees were better company anyway. I bought both types of honey and walked away smiling. 2 weeks later, I saw her again. We shared a coffee, then lunch, then a walk by the river. I haven't told her about Talia. Not everything. Not yet. She hasn't pushed. She just listens. And that's all I need for now. Someone who listens without trying to fix me. Mara didn't ask about the ring-shaped tan line on my finger, and I didn't offer the story behind it. She wasn't nosy or overly curious, just present. We'd meet up every week or so, mostly by accident at first. I'd go by the market and she'd offer me a small jar of something new to try, a sample spoon dipped in something golden and rich. She'd say things like, "This one's from bees near Indianola, super floral, you'll either love it or hate it." And I'd pretend I could tell the difference. She wasn't like Talia. That became clear almost instantly. Mara didn't move through the world like it owed her anything. She was practical, a little rough around the edges, often had dirt under her fingernails from tending her backyard garden. Her laugh wasn't polished, it was real. And when she said she'd call, she did. Still, I kept her at a distance. We'd sit in her backyard sometimes, just 2 lawn chairs in the dirt and a couple of mismatched mugs full of tea or cider. The air would smell like mint and mulch and sometimes smoke from the neighbor's grill. We talked about music, about old jobs, about dogs we used to have. Never about exes. Not until that one chilly Sunday. I was watching her prune back some scraggly potted tomato vines, bundled in one of those oversized cardigans that made her look like someone's artsy aunt. She asked, "You ever wonder what it would have been like if it worked out?" I didn't look at her. I just kept sipping my tea. "Every day," I said. She didn't ask who. She didn't press. Just nodded and said, "Yeah, me too." That night, I went home and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how strange it was to be sharing moments with someone again. I wasn't sure I was ready, but I was sure I didn't want to be alone forever. The holidays crept up before I realized it. Thanksgiving came with a sharp kind of silence. It used to be a big deal. Talia would cook. Bonnie would bring her passive-aggressive green beans. I'd carve the turkey too early and catch hell for it. Now, I heated up a frozen meal and watched an old Western. Alden texted and asked me to come by. Said Kinsey was worried I'd be alone. I didn't go. I wasn't ready to see all of them laughing and normal while I still felt like I was walking through some kind of fog. The Saturday after Thanksgiving, I went to the cemetery for the first time in months. Not for anyone in particular, just a habit I developed after Dad passed. Something about walking among headstones reminded me how little anything matters in the end. We fight, we lie, we screw up the people who love us, and then we die. It sounds dark, but there's comfort in that simplicity, in knowing we're all headed to the same place. That night, I had the dream again. Talia and I were in our old house, sitting at the kitchen table. She was cutting apples. I asked her where the Paris ticket was. She didn't answer, just kept slicing and slicing until the apple turned into something else, raw meat, maybe. And I just sat there, watching. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, mouth dry. It took me a solid 10 minutes to remember where I was, that she wasn't there, that the house wasn't ours anymore. I called Mara the next morning. I need a distraction, I told her. She said, come help me harvest the last of the comb. So I did. I spent that Sunday afternoon in her backyard in a beat-up old bee suit, learning how to slice through wax and spin honey. It was messy and slow and smelled sweet and earthy. I didn't talk much. Neither did she. But by the time I left, I felt like I could finally breathe again. Over the next month, we fell into a rhythm. Not dating, exactly. Just being near each other. I didn't tell anyone. Not Alden. Not Reese. Not even Kinsey. It wasn't a secret, just fragile. Like speaking it out loud would make it too real too fast. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Bonnie. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. She sounded tired. Older. Colin, she said. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need to tell you something. I braced myself. She's moving. My stomach tightened. Where to? Chicago. She got offered some director position at a firm there. Big deal, apparently. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how I felt. She asked me not to tell you, Bonnie added. But I thought you deserved to know. I thanked her, hung up, sat down on the edge of my bed, and stared at the floor. Chicago. A 5-hour drive and a lifetime away. I texted her that night. Colin, 8:13 p.m. heard you're heading to Chicago. Talia, 8:19 p.m. yeah. Talia, 8:20 p.m. wasn't planning to say goodbye. Didn't think you'd want me to. She was right. Colin, 8:23 p.m. good luck. That was it. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. 3 days later, I got a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a postcard from Paris. Just the Eiffel Tower at dusk. No writing. No name. Just the image. I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore it in half and tossed it in the trash. Mara came by that night with a loaf of pumpkin bread wrapped in a dish towel. Said she'd made too much. I invited her in. We didn't talk about Talia or postcards or Paris. We just sat in the kitchen, ate warm bread with butter, and listened to some old blues playing low from the radio. At some point, she leaned over and rested her head on my shoulder. And I let her. I didn't know what it meant. I still don't. But it was the first time in a long time that I didn't feel like I was borrowing someone else's peace. Weeks passed. Mara and I kept things simple. No labels, no pressure. Just two people quietly rebuilding. Then one afternoon, Alden stopped by the job site where I was fixing an HVAC unit on a new build just outside Des Moines. He had that look, something weighing on him, but waiting for the right moment to let it out. I wiped my hands, cracked open a bottle of water, and waited. He said, so, you remember Harper Lane Investments? I nodded. That's Talia's old firm, right? The one with the Paris boss. Yup. Well, they just acquired a regional HVAC service for corporate buildings, bought out Steadfast Heating. I blinked. That's the one I used to do contract work for. Right? He said, then handed me a business card. Guess who's running the local accounts from Chicago now? I looked at the name. Talia Brennan, Regional Project Liaison, Harper Lane Investments. He continued, they're managing all Midwest HVAC vendors. And the board's been pushing local contract reviews. I raised an eyebrow. You're saying she's going to see my name on something? No, he smirked. I'm saying she already did. My cousin works in that office. Said Talia looked like she'd seen a ghost when she saw your name on the short list of preferred vendors. Guess who's up for a big contract bid next month? I stared at him, everything clicking together slowly. You're kidding. He shrugged. They're having a regional vendor review next week in Chicago. It's a big deal. Your bid's strong. And you've got history with the client. I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. You want to go get a beer? Alden asked. No, I said, smiling. I've got a presentation to prep. I arrived in Chicago on a Thursday, portfolio in hand, tie straight, shoes shined. The conference was held in one of those glassy downtown towers with too much air conditioning and overly polite receptionists. I signed in under Brennan Heating and Air, a name I kept after the divorce just out of inertia. Never bothered changing it. Too much paperwork. And now, I was glad I hadn't. When I walked into the boardroom, I felt it. That flicker of tension. She was seated at the far end, in a tailored blazer, hair sleek, eyes sharp. She locked onto me for a second too long, then quickly looked down at her notes. I nodded in her direction. Didn't smile. Didn't smirk. Just nodded. She looked smaller. Not physically. Just less certain. The kind of person who wasn't used to having the past show up and sit across the table in a tie. The review lasted about 40 minutes. I kept my tone professional, steady, focused on energy efficiency data, cost reduction systems, and long-term maintenance plans. All the stuff that makes corporate folks lean forward and nod. Talia asked one question, something about subcontractor insurance. Her voice didn't waver, but I could tell she wasn't really listening. Her eyes stayed on me the entire time. Afterward, the board members shuffled out to another room for voting and coffee. I gathered my papers. She walked over. Colin. I met her eyes. Talia, you look different. So do you. She hesitated, then said, I didn't expect to see your name. That makes two of us. There was a pause. Then, like it had been burning her from the inside out, she finally said, I didn't mean to hurt you like that. I nodded slowly. But you did. She swallowed. Paris, it wasn't just an affair. It was a mistake. I raised my hand gently. You don't owe me anything, Talia, and I don't need an explanation. We both made choices. You moved on. So did I. Her eyes searched mine for something. Regret, anger, softness. I kept my expression neutral. She sighed. Do you hate me? No, I said simply. But I'm not the guy you married anymore. And you're not the woman I once knew. That version of us died the night I read that message out loud. She looked away. Then I added, funny thing is, you helped me find something better. Her brows furrowed. My independence, I said. My peace. Even a little happiness. That threw her. Before she could respond, a young woman poked her head into the room. Miss Brennan, they're ready for you. She turned, nodded, and looked back at me one last time. Good luck with the contract. I won't need it. 2 weeks later, I got the email. Congratulations. Contract awarded to Brennan Heating and Air. I smiled, then printed it out and pinned it on my fridge. Mara saw it the next day. That's a big deal, she said, her eyes wide. Yeah, it is. What made you go for it? Let's just say, I said, pouring her some of the new batch of honey. Sometimes life gives you a second shot. And sometimes, you get to show the person who broke you that you're doing just fine. She grinned. Revenge is sweet. I handed her a spoonful of honey. Not as sweet as this.